Hello and welcome to the Need to Know Music Show with me, Ronan McManus, here on Switchbox TV. And today I'm joined by an award-winning country artist who did a first gig at the age of 3 and now spends her time between Nashville and her native Australia. Please welcome Kirsty Lee Akers. How are you doing?
Good, how are you going?
I'm good. I'm good. It's been a bit of a strange year. I'd imagine you're flitting between Australia and sort of Nashville is not happening.
No, it's not happening. It was very depressing in the beginning, I'll admit. There was lots of days where I had a bit of a sulk and a bit of a cry, trying to get used to normal life and not being on the go constantly. But I'm getting used to it now, which is great. You know, I've had to adapt to how the world is these days, and normally I hate technology. Like, I would be that kind of person that would just not be on Facebook or social media if I didn't have to be.
Yeah.
But you know, I've kind of adapted to doing these things over Zoom, and I was meant to be in Nashville in April to write for my new album, but that obviously got cancelled. So had to adapt to that, and I actually wrote with all the same people I was going to write with. I just did it over Zoom, which was really interesting because I'd never done that before. I'd only ever written in person with other songwriters. So it was really cool to do it that way, and to see that, you know, even though the world was going crazy, I guess it didn't mean that everything had to stop, which was great.
I mean, there's obviously the technical issues with playing simultaneously. If anybody's had a lockdown birthday this year, will realise that singing Happy Birthday over Zoom just doesn't work because
It
there's a
doesn't. We
slight
went into,
delay.
yeah, we went into lockdown here in Australia a week before my birthday, which totally
Oh,
sucked.
oh no.
I know, I was like, why couldn't it have just been a week after my birthday? But anyway, have to make up for it next year. Remember now, happy birthday.
Yeah, so you get 2 next year. It's fine.
Yeah.
So, but you realise that you can't sing at the same time. You can't. There's just a slight
Yeah.
delay. You don't notice in conversation, but when you're playing music or trying to sing Happy Birthday together, then you realise it. Um, so, what was that like? Is much more of I've heard it's much more of a back and forth thing. And did you find that give you any? Was there any advantages to that?
Yeah, well, I think it was actually kind of cool because you know, sometimes when you go into a co-writing session, especially over in Nashville, some writers, you know, they'll have 2 or 3 sessions a day, and you know, that's their full-time job. So they go into the office in the morning and they start writing. They knock off at 5 o'clock. Whereas doing it over Zoom, it was kind of cool. You didn't feel as rushed, I guess, you know. And the writers that I wrote with, we all would sort of brainstorm beforehand. So we'd send each other messages on Facebook or send each other voice memos of ideas that we'd had. You know, we might know that we're writing next week, so we'd send each other something like, you know, 3 or 4 days previous and say, hey, this is what I've been thinking about. What do you think of this? And then they'd sit with it for a little bit. So then by the time we actually sit down in the Zoom together, you know, we've got sort of half an idea for a song altogether. So yeah, I really liked that aspect of it. I do miss the being in person part. You know, it's definitely will never be, you know, as good as being, you know, in the same room as you know, the other songwriters. But for what it is, and for, you know, how the world is going right now, it's just good to know that we can adapt and we don't have to cancel everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, what I wanted to talk to you about your amazing musical start to life, because it's such a uh, so much stuff in your early days. I mean, the first gig at 3 years old,
Yeah.
first performance 3 years old, and then the sort of busking in Tamworth, which is was right. It's the country capital of Australia. Is that right?
Yeah, that's our version of Nashville, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So what was it? What was your childhood like? Obviously, performing at 3 years old is a kind of strange, but what was that like? What was your childhood like musically?
Yeah, well, for me, it was awesome. I didn't know any different. I grew up in a musical family, so my mum comes from a massive family. My mum and all her sisters and my nan, they all sang country music. So before I actually sort of went to school, I kind of thought that's what everybody's family did, you know. I thought
I'm the
everybody
same
just,
way, actually. Yeah, we
yeah,
had a very musical
yeah,
upbringing. Our whole house was full of music, and
yeah. So I
my
just
dad
didn't
was a
really
musician and everything. Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
know any different. So it was really great for me growing up. And my mum, you know, she would always sing, and she fell pregnant with me really young. She was 16 when she fell pregnant with me. So I guess her musical dreams kind of went out the window when I came along, and she was raising me. So I guess she, put all her effort into me, which was great because, I just loved music from the get-go. And she entered me in my very first talent quest at 3 years old, and I've still got the video of it, which is really great because we didn't have a camera or anything back then, but I was just so lucky there was someone in the audience that day that filmed it and ended up giving it to me later on in life. So yeah, it's really cool to see mum, she sits on the side of the stage and she like sings the words out really loudly so I could hear them and know where to come in. And then eventually I got to an age where I'd kick her off the stage and be like, yeah, I can do this on my own now.
I'm flying the nest, mum.
Yeah, yeah. So it was lots of fun, and we didn't have a lot growing up at all. Both my parents, were very young when they had me, but they would save up all year, and pretty much our life revolved around my musical dreams. We'd travel to somewhere different every weekend, and I'd enter in competitions. And you mentioned Tamworth. Tamworth is our home of country music in Australia, and we have a massive country music festival every year in January. And so that would be our one holiday every year. Mum and Dad would save up to go to Tamworth, and we'd camp, which was crazy because it's so ridiculously hot in Tamworth in January. So I just can't believe that they did all those kind of things, but they were just so supportive of my career growing up. And yeah, so we'd go to Tamworth every year, and I'd busk on the streets, and Mum would make me save that money every year and put it in a bank account. And then by the time I was, I think, 15, I had enough money to record my very first little EP, and yeah, it all just went from there.
Fantastic. What an amazing experience. We
Yeah,
so that recording is it You Are My Sunshine, by any chance? Is it
yeah,
what's that
yeah.
recording at the start of the track 1991, isn't it?
Yeah, so
And
that
there's
recording
got,
was
so if
actually
people want to hear it, they can actually, it's actually a start of your first album, is that right? Or one of
that
the, no,
one
your
was my
2011
third.
album.
That was my third album. Yeah, my third album.
Yeah.
That one, my Naked album. Yeah, so that recording is that's from when I was a 3 year old performing in my very first talent quest for the first time.
It's amazing because I think that's the first album that's on Spotify. If you go on to Spotify, it's the
Yeah,
first
yeah,
album that appears on there, so people can actually
yeah,
check that out, check that
yeah,
that performance out. But so yeah, so the I think I was looking at your sort of your career path, and there's those 3 years from 2005 2007 where just so much stuff happened for you in that time. It was just like, I mean, tell us a bit about the Frank Ifield Award.
yeah.
That comes up first.
Yeah, I think that was around 2005,
Yeah.
which was the year I finished high school. So I was in year 12 in 2005, and I remember getting called up to the office at school and having to explain why I'd had so many days off school. And it's because I was always going to different, events, singing and performing. And I remember just thinking, oh my God, I'm not going to pass. But my parents were the total opposite. A lot of parents will be like, you need to get a real job and go to university. But my parents like, no, do not get a real job. If you give up music, we'll be so disappointed. So
That's like
I
my
was very
family, the same way. Yeah,
lucky.
I wish my parents had been a little bit more strict in some ways. I might actually
I
have some
say the same
qualifications.
thing. Yeah, I say the same thing. So I was very lucky I had that support. And you mentioned Frank Ifield. He was a big support of mine the very early days of my career. I I can't even really remember how we sort of got to know each other. I think it was just from I just happened to be performing at different events that he'd been at, and he'd been watching me, of course, throughout the years. And he has an award that he gives out every year over here in Australia called the Frank Ifield Spur Award, and that's for up and coming new talent. And yeah, I was very lucky enough to be the recipient of that in 2005, which was a massive honour. And it's funny you mentioned that because going into lockdown, I think I did what most people did. I went on a big clean out and cleaned all the shed out and started finding things. And I actually found that award, the Frank Ifield Award. I hadn't seen
Oh
it for a
wow!
really long time, so it's funny you bring that up.
Well, it seemed you went to the Country Music Academy, the CMAA. It was called something else then, I
Yeah,
think, when you.
CMAA.
But yeah, so what was that? What was that like? Is that like I mean, is that just like like a music school where you kind of learn the
Yeah,
craft, or how is that run? Because that's really interesting
yeah.
concept.
Yeah, so over here we have the junior college and the senior college, and So I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to go to the Junior College of Country Music. I think that was around 2004 maybe. And it's a 2 week long program where you go and it's like you stay in like a boarding school. So they have about, I think it was about maybe 30 young artists from all over Australia. You come together and you stay there, and it's just full on like mentoring every single day and doing performances and workshops. And a lot of our more well known country artists over here in Australia will come in and you know, mentor us on different days, which
That's
was really cool.
fantastic. That's
Yeah.
fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah. They have a senior college which I was hoping to go to, but I had already signed my first record deal before I was old enough to actually go to it. So didn't get
It's
to
a
go.
pretty good
But
excuse. It's a pretty
yeah,
good
yeah,
excuse.
can't complain.
So just looking at the stuff I mean, 2006, there's so much stuff that you did. Um, you know, uh, gosh, I'm trying to read it all now. It's just like crazy, the amount of stuff. Because you went to Nashville in 2005 for the first time. Is that right? So
Yeah,
that's
the very first
so what
I won. Yeah,
so what was that like? I mean, Tamworth being the kind of the Australian Nashville, then going to the actual Nashville.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
They
what
are
was
a lot different.
I mean, yeah, what were the differences? Was there a kind of a culture shock, or was
Yeah.
there enough sort of familiarity to kind of you to feel at home?
There was
what was the
both.
feeling?
There was that familiarity, you know, of country music because I'd grown up on country music my whole life. It's the only music I ever knew growing up, and you know, all my favorite artists, you know, started in Nashville. So it had that familiarity where you know you step off the plane at Nashville Airport and you got like Alan Jackson welcoming you to Nashville. That was really cool. But at the same time, it was a total culture shock because I'd never even been on a plane before, let alone to another country. So it was
Wow.
crazy. I was just very lucky. I won a competition called the Telstra Road to Tamworth, and that's what won me my trip to Nashville for the very first time in 2006. So yeah, it was just a dream. That whole trip, I remember just going over there and just being in awe, and I was getting, you know, taken to all these different places, you know, all at once. And because I was only there for 2 weeks that first trip, and I had to go and write with, you know, some really amazing songwriters at Universal Publishing, and I'd never even co-written before, so it was crazy. I just got thrown in the deep end with these people that had written hits for, you know, uh, Alan Jackson, one of them, Loretta Lynn, people like that, and I was just like, amazed. So that was a total shock, but of course I fell in love with it, as a lot of people do when they very first go. And I knew that that was going to be a place that I would go back to a lot. And I've lived over there for periods of time, and I've been traveling back and forth ever since then. But Australia will always be my home. I love Australia, of course, but a big chunk of my heart is definitely in Nashville.
You must have learned so much in that your time there the first time. I mean, was it hard to kind of soak it all up?
Yeah,
Were you able to? It must have been quite an assault on the senses to kind of have all that stuff happening in such a
yeah,
short space of time at such a young age.
it
I mean,
was.
how did you
And
handle that?
I look back on it now and I think about, you know, all the things that happened in that period and all the opportunities I was given. And I think at the time I was so young and naive. I thought, you know, oh yeah, everyone, you know, at 18 gets to go to Nashville and they get granted, you know, all these opportunities. Oh yeah, whatever. And I look back on it now and I think, oh my God, I wish, you know, I wish I was a little bit older so I could have appreciated it a little bit more. Like, not that I didn't appreciate it, but, you know, as you get older, you look back on things and you think, man, that was an amazing opportunity. And I don't think I really grasped at the time what an amazing opportunity it was. I remember I was singing in this most random place out, I don't know where it was. It was like a half an hour out of Nashville. It's called the Long Hollow Jamboree or something like that. I didn't think, you know, there was going to be anyone in the audience, but I got up and sang, and Charlie Leuven from the Leuven Brothers was in the audience, and he saw me sing, and he came over, and he started talking to me, and he's a member of the Grand Ole Opry. He invited me as his special guest to the Grand Ole Opry that night, and so I was like, oh yeah, whatever. So, you know, it was amazing. You know, my very first trip to Nashville, I just happened to randomly meet Charlie Leuven from the Leuven Brothers, and he's invited me as his special guest to the Grand Ole Opry, and just got to hang backstage with Gretchen Wilson and all the artists that were playing that night, and got to sit on the stage while they were doing the show, which was really cool. So, yeah, I had a lot of amazing experiences that happened in that very first trip over there.
I think there's maybe something to be said for not for kind of being so young to take it in your stride that you kind of didn't overthink it and you just kind of took
Yeah,
it and you just took
yeah,
everything for what it was. Something there's maybe something to be said for that. I think when you get a bit older, maybe you tend to
definitely.
overanalyze things a bit more, but maybe it was
Yeah,
kind of right. But I mean, you talk about there being a lot of luck and everything, but you obviously there was something in you that people saw that because there's a lot of awards and things. There seems to be a lot of things that you got, which kind of a lot that help young
yeah,
artists to develop. And I think that's something that's really missing in other parts of the world. I don't think those things exist in such abundance as they do in Tamworth, in that kind of country music, Australian country music scene. It's great that there's these grants and awards and
yeah.
helps up because you're a living example of how that has really every step you took was a step up. It seems in that
Oh,
time.
definitely. Yeah, we're incredibly lucky here in Australia, especially our little country music industry we have. To us, it sort of seems so small compared to Nashville, but at the same time, it is really great that we have that sort of grassroots connection here in Australia. And as you said, there's
Yeah,
so many well, especially when I was, growing up and as a teenager, there's so many opportunities. And as I just, the competition I was just talking about, the Telstra Road to Tamworth that got me to Nashville. And then the year after I won that, I won a competition called Toyota Star Maker, which is the same competition that Keith Urban won that sort of set him up on his way. And that competition has been going for over 40 years in Australia, and it has launched pretty much most of our major artists in Australia have got their start from either being, in the grand final of Star Maker or winning Star Maker. So I was very, very lucky. As you said, yes, I did work very hard, but also yes,
yeah.
I was very lucky that we had those opportunities as young artists here in Australia. And that winning Star Maker was that really sort of set me up here in Australia. That got me my very first record deal. I released my very first album, and over here, our CMA awards are called the Golden Guitar Awards, and that won me my
Yeah.
very first Golden Guitar for Best New Talent of the Year. So, yeah, looking back, those few years in the very beginning were just such a whirlwind, and it's funny. I was actually looking back when I was doing the whole clean out of the shed. I found one of my, little workbooks from when I was a teenager, and I had like a bunch of my goals written in there that I'd wanted to achieve. And I remember
Ah,
looking at this one page and like all these goals that sat down, I'd actually achieved them in like the 12-month period. And so then I had to write a whole new bunch of goals. So that was actually really cool to look back on, because it's very easy to take for granted. Well, I don't know whether to take for granted is the right word, but to not, celebrate the small wins, I guess. A lot of the time, you know, right now we can be living something that we once dreamed of, 5, 10 years ago, and you don't really realize it at the time until you look back and you think, yeah, wow, that is pretty cool.
you sort of become things that were dreams become the norm, but
Yeah,
it's good to keep striving and keep moving that bar higher. But yeah,
definitely.
it's also good to sort of reflect and recognize what
Yeah,
you've
you got to
achieved.
celebrate the small wins as well as the big ones.
It's hard as an artist to do that because you're kind of constantly thinking what's next, and it's
Yeah,
hard to sort of where you. Well, a lot of ingredients went into your first album. In fairness, I mean that's the first album's called Little Things. Is that right? In 2007. So a lot of ingredients went into that. So those songs on that album, they were the result of the songwriting sessions and all the stuff that you'd done in Nashville and all that kind of stuff. How did you feel getting that first album out, done, recorded,
yeah.
stamped, achieved?
It was amazing. I my whole life I dreamed of making an album. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, your whole life," but really, I started singing country music when I was 3 years old, and
I was
if
going
you
to say
look back,
you were going since three, so you were
yeah,
kind of like in your musical middle age by the time
I
you
know
got to
I
your
felt like
teens.
I was a veteran by the time I started. So, and I think that was one thing that really helped me as well as a young artist was because I had been around for so long already. I already knew pretty much everyone in the music industry. So that really helped me out as a young person, trying to get their start in the industry. Um, so yeah, looking back on that time and that very first album, it was a lot of sort of hard work that led up to that album. A lot of people think, oh, you won a competition and, 3 months later you released an album. It's an overnight success kind of thing. But it's not really, it's true what they say, my overnight success took about 10, 15 years. And they say that about Nashville as well. They call it a 10-year town. A lot of people think you go to Nashville and then, 3 months later, like the TV show Nashville, you got a record deal and you're out on tour.
Yeah.
But, most of us know that that doesn't happen like that, unfortunately.
Well, I think it's testament to your parents obviously saw the talent in you and really nurtured that. And there's something to be said for that. There's I think society in general, you're kind of taught to get the real job and
Yeah.
get the sort of safety net underneath you and all that kind of stuff. But if you've got an artistic talent like that, and it's actually a crime to not nurture that. So I think it's really testament to your parents' vision for
Definitely.
where you could go, and recognizing that as early as they did, and really pushing you towards that goal, and realize must have seen the dedication in you as well. They weren't
Yeah.
pushing you; they were supporting you. It's a big difference. Um,
Definitely. I think you're right how you said, they obviously saw something in me because, I have a younger sister and two younger brothers, and as talented as they are, they aren't in the music industry or anything like that. They did their own sort of thing. So it's not like I had these crazy parents that were making us lock us in a room and make us learn instruments and make us sing. I was the only one out of all of us that wanted to do that. None of them play an instrument or anything like that or sing or anything like that. They're more into sports. So yeah, they obviously saw that in me, and I'm just so lucky and so grateful that they really supported that. And yeah, it's crazy to think what I would be doing or where I would be if I didn't have that support. So yeah, very very lucky and grateful.
I want to take a little leap forward to your 2018 album, Under My Skin, which, am I right in saying, is the first one that you produced yourself?
Yeah.
And from listening to your albums, what I noticed, listening to the first two tracks, Skeletons and Under My Skin itself, it's quite a statement of, it's like
Yeah.
your early albums are very much sort of traditional country, and you got a lot of comparisons with Dolly Parton and and more the sort of classic country artists. But Skeletons from the off it's got that electric guitar coming in. It's all like a real kind of almost a dirtier sort of sound.
Yeah.
And then Under My Skin, it's got tones of like the Bangles and kind of that kind of thing about it. A real pop sort of the great
Yeah.
guitar riff in there. Was that something purposely you wanted to sort of put a slightly different stamp on this
Yeah.
album?
Definitely. I've always wanted to produce my own album, but it was just all about, having the confidence to do it, I guess, because you always sort of second guess yourself as an artist. And I'm incredibly proud of all my previous albums. Of course, I love those albums. And as you said, they have a more traditional country sound to them. And that's because I did grow up on, really pure traditional country music. I didn't really know there was any other music until I got to about 10 or 12 years old. I just thought that's what everyone listened to, because my mom and my dad, they didn't listen to anything but like Hank Williams and Dolly Parton and Loretta Lynn, which I'm very grateful for because I love those artists. But then as I got a little bit older and became a teenager, I guess I kind of rebelled a little bit and started listening more sort of pop music. And when I say pop music today, it would be considered country music, like Sheryl Crow and Shania
I was going to
Twain.
say, Cheryl Crow definitely can hear influences that. I mean, strong female artists, and Sheryl Crow. There's elements of country in what she does for sure.
Definitely,
Southern rock certainly,
definitely.
but also
'Cause I
also
picked
can
up on
feel a sort of also can feel like hear a Larkin Poe kind of sort of, do you know Larkin Poe, the sisters, Lovell
no,
sisters, and
no.
they're two sisters, and there's very sort of
I'll have to look them up.
bluesy rock guitar. Yeah, you'd love it. I mean, it's that
Yeah,
this sort of the Skeletons opening riff kind of reminded me a bit of that. It's that kind of sort of much more of a hard hitting sound. It feels like you maybe finding a slightly different voice now, and that's, I think that's got to be a positive thing. I mean, what were your feelings about when you started to record it, and personnel involved in it, and what you would. I mean, was it? What did it feel? Felt different?
Yeah, definitely. This whole album was totally different. As in, one, I was producing it myself for the very first time. I've been lucky to work with some amazing producers in the past, and I've always gone into to make an album and use session players, which is what a lot of people do, which is great. But for this album, and especially because I was producing it myself, I really wanted to use my band that I use on the road because they just know my sound and my styles, the best out of everyone. They know me inside out. So I knew for this, yeah, this very first album, producing it myself, I wanted to have guys in there that I was going to be 100% comfortable with. I wasn't going to hold back or anything like that, and just say this is what we're doing, this is what I want it to sound like. And they really played a big part in bringing it to life as well, because they, as I said, they know me the best, and whenever I write new songs, they will be the first ones that hear them and the first ones that play them, and they're the guys that come up with the riffs when we're demoing them up and everything. So it felt like, if I went into a studio and did it with session players, it just didn't feel right to do that. So I'm so glad I used my band on the road, and I'm getting ready to record my next album now, and yeah, I'm going to produce it.
That was my next question. I was going to ask you what's because that was 2018. So I'm thinking,
Yeah.
it sounds like that was like almost another start of another chapter.
Yeah, definitely. And, I want to continue that same sort of sound, but also at the same time, I never want to release an album that, sounds exactly the same as the previous one, just, extended. I always want to try something a little bit different. And I'll never, ever sway away from my, traditional country roots. Whenever I record an album, you'll always at least find one real traditional country song on my albums, and you'll definitely hear that with the next album as well. But it'll be definitely keeping with that sort of Sheryl Crow vibe as well. I just love Sheryl Crow. She's amazing. As you said, she
She
has
is
country
amazing.
elements to her. So you'll definitely hear more of that sound on this album, of course. And it's going to be interesting because all these songs that I've written for the album have been written in lockdown, so I guess that's gonna make it a little bit different in that aspect. Because normally when I write songs over in Nashville, whoever I'm writing with over there, normally they'll come up with a demo straight away, and that sort of sets the basis for what the song's gonna sound like. And then you take that demo to whoever's recording on the album. But with these songs, they haven't been demoed up or anything like that yet. So we're going to be starting from pretty much from scratch. So it's going to be really interesting to see what we come up with.
That's going to be a different journey again. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to ask you about the houses full of flowers, because that was. I mean, I tend to always sort of gravitate towards the melancholy, and I it was all I and that is such a beautiful song. What's the story behind that song, if you don't mind me asking? If it's not too personal a question.
Yeah, so it kind of has a long story behind it, but this song is a song I wrote about a young girl from my hometown. Her name is Hannah Rye, and I met Hannah through my music school that I was running at the time in my hometown, and she had contacted me when she was, I don't know, she was probably about 13 or 14 maybe at the time, and she contacted me on Facebook, and a few of her friends were, in the music school that I was running, and she wanted to join it. So, we started talking over Facebook, and we set up a time for her to join and start doing classes and lessons. And then I got a message about a week later, and she said to me, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I hate to stuff you around, but I can't come and join the music school anymore because I just found out I have cancer." And so that that I just felt terrible for her at the time. I didn't know her very well at the time or anything like that, but of course your heart goes out to a young girl that's just been diagnosed with cancer, and to think that she was apologizing to me for stuffing me around.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about that. You just get better, and so we actually became friends over the next sort of 12 months, and she'd come to my concerts and things like that, and she actually went into remission, and she was all healthy and everything, and she actually appeared in one of my music videos. I did a music video where I filmed it at my old high school that I went to, and she was a student there, so she played one of the parts in the music video that day. And then just I think it was about 2 months after that, she found out that the cancer had came back, and she was terminal, unfortunately, and she was 15 at the time. And I just remember how devastated I was, and I'd only just known her for the past 12 months, so I couldn't imagine what her family was going through. So yeah, over that period of time, we became really close, and she had actually asked me to perform her favorite song for her at her funeral. And I remember thinking, oh, I just know I'm not going to be able to do that on the day. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get through it, but and as it turned out, I was actually in Nashville at the time, so I got out of having to do that task because it's I know most artists have performed at a funeral at one point in their
Yeah,
life.
it's the toughest thing. Yeah,
It's the toughest thing, especially when you know the person and you become friends with
yeah.
him. And yeah, so anyway, Hannah, before she died, she came up with a bucket list of things she wanted to do. And one of those things she wanted to do was go to her year 10 formal. I don't know if you have those over in England, but it's like, your
Like a prom
graduation.
kind of thing.
Yeah, prom. We have one in year 10 and then year 12. So she knew that she wasn't going to be here at the time of her year 10 formal. So the school held it early for her so that she could attend.
Oh, amazing.
One of our famous football players over here in Australia went as her date. So she sort of made the news
Oh,
all over the world at the time for that, and all over Australia. And she was loving all the attention, which was great. And so about 2 weeks before she had passed away, I knew I was going to Nashville, and I knew I wasn't going to see her again. So I went and spent the day with her. Her mum organised, for me to go and spend the day with her. And I remember she was just so sick that day. She couldn't get out of bed or anything like that. She wasn't really um, there 100%, I guess you could say. But I sat there with her and sang her some songs, and she would light up every now and again. And I left that day. I went home and I knew that that was going to be the last time I would see her. And I sat down and started writing the song. I think I started writing the first verse, and then I wrote the chorus, and then I just couldn't bring myself to finish writing the song because the song is from Hannah's perspective once she's already gone, and I felt like I was kind of jinxing her by writing this song. Like, she's
yeah.
already gone, she was still alive. So I sort of just left it, didn't think much of it. And then as I said, I was over in Nashville the day she passed away, and I was riding with my good friend Jerry Sally that day, and he could tell, I was really upset that day. And we got to talking about Hannah, and I played him the bits of the song that I'd already written, and he said, we've got to finish this song for Hannah, and so we sat down and finished it, and that's how it came about. And it's yeah, definitely a favorite song of mine on the album, and it's a favorite of a lot of my fans, which is really good. But yeah, I know she'd be loving that attention she's getting. And we actually the music
Amazing.
video we filmed for it, we released it on her 1 year anniversary, because the song actually talks about, it's been 1 year today since
Saw that. Yeah, yeah.
so we actually, the video clip features all footage of her, throughout her journey. So it was a really great thing that I wanted to do it, not even just to release out to the public, but just to do something for her mum and dad, to give them something. So they were the first people that we played it to and sent it to them, and they just said, you've given us such a gift because we can watch this whenever we want to think about Hannah. And yeah, so every year it pops up, and yeah, it's just
Oh, it's amazing. Beautiful song. I mean, congratulations on the song, and it must be quite cathartic for her family to have that. And it's nice to have that sort of tribute to her, and it's a beautiful thing.
yeah, thank you.
Looking back over your sort of career, which is obviously started when you were three, it's quite a long time. What sort of highlights would you pick out, moments that you pick out, things that you're proud of, or musically or personally, actually, over that time? What would you pick out?
Yeah, there has been a lot of highlights, and some of them you forget about until you mention some of them. But I think a massive highlight for me was going over to Nashville for the very first time. That was always a dream of mine. If you read back through like newspaper clippings of me as a kid, and they'd always ask, what do you want to be in the future, or whatever, or what do you want to do? It was always, I want to go to Nashville. So that was a major highlight, of course. Winning Star Maker was a massive highlight for me because that was a competition that I'd grown up watching. Every year we'd go to Tamworth and we'd buy tickets to the show, and you'd see who the next big star of country music was going to be. And I remember people like Keith Urban winning, and thinking, man, I'd love to be able to do that one day. And you had to be 18 to enter the competition. So as soon as I turned 18, I was like, got to get my entry in, and just very lucky that I only had to enter it once, because a lot of people will keep entering, and they might not win it the first year, but then they go on to win it the next year. So I was very lucky I was able to win it that first year. So that was a major highlight. And of course, winning my very first golden guitar, that was another big highlight, because that's all my favorite artists that I grew up listening to in Australia. They've all won golden guitars, so that was a really big highlight. And just getting to do what I love, growing up as a kid. If I, had told myself some of the things that I've been able to achieve and do, I'd be like, really? So,
Yeah,
yeah, lots of highlights in there, but they're probably the biggest ones.
excellent. Yeah. Um, so the new album, what's the sort of time frame on getting in the studio, and when are we
Yeah,
likely to hear anything from that? I know everything's a bit hard to
yeah.
predict at the moment, but do your best.
So hard right now because I should have actually already recorded the album, but over here in Australia, all of our borders are shut. So my drummer is in Queensland, my guitarist is in Melbourne, and I'm in New South Wales. So our three states are all locked out from one another at the moment. So
Right.
we've rescheduled it so many times this year, and then they close the borders, and then they say they're going to open it, and then we reschedule. So at the moment, we're just holding out now to find out when the borders are going to open. We're hoping, they keep saying that we've got to have 28 days straight of no cases in New South Wales, I guess you could call it, before they'll
Yeah,
open the borders. So we're
it could be a
hoping.
while. Yeah.
I'm hoping, maybe sometime over the Christmas holidays, the borders will be open and we can, I can get myself and the band together. We can get in the studio. We've got the songs there waiting. We're just waiting, and I could go and do it with other players or in another studio, but I just don't want to. I want to keep to the original plan because I know it's holding out's going to be so much better and create a better product, and it might put us back a little bit, but hopefully it'll be worth it in the end. So fingers crossed, we can release the first single from it early next year, and then the album will be out next year sometime.
Well, if Under My Skin is anything to go by, this feel like it's a second installment of that chapter, then it'd be definitely worth the wait. Anyway,
Thank you.
we also asked for a recommendation of an artist that either that just someone that people need to know about. You can either be
Yeah.
someone that's sort of new that you want to promote, or it could be someone that's kind of influenced your career, whichever way you want to go with it.
I'm gonna look at my Spotify because I know
Yeah.
I'm gonna look later and go, oh, why didn't I suggest that one? So I've been listening to the last couple of days. Okay, yeah. So I don't even know if this is the way you pronounce her name, but there's an artist out of Nashville, and I've been listening to one of her songs over and over again. It's called Small Town Hypocrite, and her name's Kaylee Hemick. I think that's how you say it. Um, so she's just sort of starting out in the industry, I think, now. We haven't actually heard of her on radio over here in Australia or anything like that. She's just someone I happen to come across on Spotify, luckily. As much as I hate technology, I do love that, we cover new music in that way. So yeah, she's definitely someone that I think is going to do big things in the future, and got to check out that song, Small Town Hypocrite, because yeah, I really love it. It's awesome.
And who's coming out of the Australian country scene at the moment? Well, a young artist for us to look out for in the Australian scene.
Lots and lots of new artists are coming out. That's what's one great thing about Australia. There always seems to be new talent up and coming, which is really great. There is a young guy. He actually won Star Maker a couple of years ago, maybe, and his name's Blake O'Connor. I actually think he might have went over to the UK and performed last year at the Buckle and Boots Festival. Maybe I think he might have. But
Okay.
yeah, he's Blake O'Connor. He's got a real sort of Chris Stapleton vibe to him, sort of real bluesy sort of country sound to him. You look at him and he's like a real pretty boy, and you don't think that sound's going to come out of him. And he plays amazing guitar as well. He's an amazing guitarist. And I think he just turned 20 years old. So I think, yeah, we're going to see big
Wow.
things out over here in Australia.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we'll look out for him. We'll put the links to those guys into the description so people can check them out. But Kirsty, thanks so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. It's an
Thanks.
amazing journey you've been on, and I feel like maybe just hitting your stride, really. You kind of just you're sort of finding your own sort of voice or a new chapter of your career, and it's really exciting. It could be really exciting to hear the new album and to see it develop further. So good luck with it all.
Thanks so
All
much,
right.
and fingers crossed I can get over to your side of the world at some point soon.
Absolutely. You need to come and see us and come and perform for us over here.
Love to. Yeah.
All right. Great stuff. Thanks, Kirsty. Cheers
Thank
now.
you.